Okay, so I'd like to extend a really warm welcome to everyone who's watching, in the general public, and to my leadership team and officers present tonight. So before we start, I'd just like to say that the meeting is being held in accordance with the Council's standing orders and the protocols and procedures for remote meetings adopted by the Council on the 20th of May. Please bear with us if we get into any, or I get into any technical difficulties. If my computer goes down, Kim Taylor-Smith will be acting for me, and he'll take over the meeting. During the meeting, the recommendations for each item will be put up on the screen before we make the recommendations, but there are a synopsis of them. The actual recommendations are as in the report, as on the website. But the thing which will come up on the screen will be a synopsis because it's easier to refer to it. A few technical points. If you could possibly all mute your microphones, and if you could turn on your microphone and turn on your camera when you're speaking, that would be helpful. Otherwise, could everything be muted? Could you all make sure, and that includes me, that a mobile phone that you might have or any other gadget in the room is on silent, so that if you are speaking, it doesn't go off, and that's particularly important during the 72 seconds silence. The other thing I was going to say, that the way I'm going to chair this meeting is when we go through each item, I'll ask questions from the leadership team first. Then I will ask the chair of the OSC, Marie-Therese Rossi, if she has any comments or anything that she needs to feed back from her select committees. Councillor Pat Mason, I'll ask him whether he'd like a question. And Judith Blakeman, Councillor Blakeman's also in this meeting. And as a matter of courtesy, of course, I'll ask her if she's got a question. But the main purpose of the meeting is for the leadership team to study the reports in front of them and make sure that they are happy with the recommendations laid out before them. What else? Oh yes, finally, especially officers, could you possibly say who you are before you begin to speak, because people may not know who you are. And actually probably goes for lead members as well. When you first speak, if you could just say who you are so people watching from home know. Right, so let's begin. Let's go through introductions. If I read your name, perhaps you could just then turn your camera on and say whether you're present. So, Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Present.
Maybe he's not here.
No, I'm
present. Fantastic. Councillor Addenbrook.
Present.
Councillor Siren.
Present.
Councillor Folkes. There she is, present. Catherine Folkes, are you here? Evidently not. Maybe she'll be joining us in a minute. Councillor Kamali?
present. Yeah.
Councillor Randall?
Here.
Councillor Thalasites?
Present.
Councillor Wheel?
Present.
Councillor Will?
Present.
Hooray. And let's go back to Councillor Folkes in case she was muted or needs to unmute herself or anything. Not yet. Okay. Thank you. The other thing I forgot to mention, actually, is that please use the chat function to ask questions, but please do it in such a way that you just put a Q in, because otherwise I will probably get lost in the weeds of all what your questions are. And in addition to that, your question won't be noted in the minutes. So if we could please just use the chat function just to say if you wish to answer a question in the leadership team. And as I said, at the end of each item, there's my phone binging. I obviously had it on the wrong thing. At the end of each section, I will then come out and ask Councillor Rossi, Councillor Mason, Councillor Blakeman, as there are 3 councillors in the room, not on the leadership team, for their comments. So we don't need to have a complete separate conversation going on the side. Thank you. And with that, please could we, when I'll ask everyone who's participating and watching, please could we take 72 seconds silence now to remember those who died in the Grenfell tragedy.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Ginty. Right, so the next thing that we have are there any declarations of interest? And are there any apologies for absence? Done it the wrong way around, so let's start again. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? I believe that Councillor Folkes has joined the meeting. Is that correct?
No, there are no apologies for absence.
Great. Are there any declarations of interest? No? Okay, so the minutes of the leadership team meeting held on the 3rd of June 2020. Can I please get your confirmation by your silence that they are a correct and true record so that I
put
can
a Q in
sign.
the chat function.
Okay, Councillor Bateman.
Yes, the point I wanted to make is that they're very brief minutes. They didn't actually say what was discussed. And as the Community Housing Supplementary Planning document had not been to scrutiny, I think the questions that were asked and that should be included and the answers.
I note your comments, but actually you're not part of the leadership team. So my question is to the leadership team whether they are happy, given your comments, to sign these as a true and accurate statement. And yes. I haven't got anyone saying no.
Yes.
So can we take that? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item A4, which is the financial outturn report. So, Councillor Mary Wheel, could you please turn your camera on and your mic on and introduce it, please? And I understand that Mike Curtis and Taran are also here to answer questions. And actually, before you do anything, Mary, I should just like to say, I think this is a really, really fantastic report. I think it's excellent. I think it's really succinct, has so much information in it. It'll take us a long time to absorb, but it's very well written. It's very clearly laid out, and it's made everything just concise and at the same time as having enough detail. So thank you very much, Mike Curtis, and thank you to Taran as well. Over to you, Mary.
Yes, I mean, I would just add to that. I think it's incredibly important in terms of being open and transparent that we write papers like this that are so clear, because as one colleague said to me, you know, you read this paper and actually you haven't got any questions because every single question you thought you might have is answered in it, but clearly and succinctly. So my big thanks also go to Mike and Taran for that, because it really makes a huge difference. I don't think actually there's very much to add on this paper because we have in a sense seen it over the months anyway. I suppose what I would say is that where we have overspends, we are now, very clearly the practice that we take those and we absorb them into next year's budget. So if we're overachieving, for example, on the treasury management strategy, that is reflected in the next year's budget, so that we're not perpetuating the same underspends or the same over earnings every year in our budget, and that we're trying to get closer to what really the real situation is. But I have nothing really more to add than that on this paper, and perhaps Michael Taryn might want to add something.
Mike Taryn, anything you wish to add?
Nothing from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
No, sorry, nothing to add.
Okay, I just have one or two questions, and it's to my colleagues actually. Councillor Rendell, the Children's Grenfell Education Fund is quite overspent. Just wonder whether you want to comment on that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, this was something I noticed in the report as well about that, and of course, it is a concern. And I note that the Families and Children's Service Division has an overall overspend, not only with the Grenfell Educational Fund, but also Family Services, COVID-19 costs, and obviously an educational overspend as well. Of course, with the Grenfell Educational Fund, we're currently re-looking at those provisions. As you know, there's a consultation going on at the moment on refunding of certain provisions, especially therapeutic provisions, going forward. That has been delayed somewhat, but we're still undertaking those particular provisions. I know we're still hoping to target that schools will be funding those provisions directly in the next few months. But it definitely is something that is on my radar to look at. I know with those extracurricular activities, additional tuition, etc. This is something that we need to be aware of. But I'm conscious that the department has an overspend, which, as Councillor Wheel said earlier, we need to take into account for next year to see what we can do.
Thank you. And temporary accommodation, Kim, I don't know whether you want to comment on that. That looked like quite a big overspend.
Yes, right, I've got my camera and everything else. Yes, you're right. And this is only obviously one part of the story. I mean, this is our general TA accommodation, which is overspent, and we have a programme at the moment in order to reduce that. So obviously, we mustn't forget that we have temporary accommodation that relating to Grenfell on the displaced households that were on Lancaster West Estate, and that at the moment is being charged to the Recovery Fund, and that's something which is of concern because it's costing effectively about £36,000 a month. This is a total cost of about £427,000, which we have, which is not incorporated in this account. But yes, we're under a lot of pressure at the moment owing to significant increase in the number of households we're supporting.
Thank you. And my last observation was planning and borough development. Johnny, I would want to know whether you had anything to say about that overspend too. 800,000.
Yeah, I mean, I think the crux of that is around the lower income generation than we had forecast, and that's something we need to keep thinking about and reviewing all of the services that we provide, because it's possible that, or likely probably that we'll see a lower amount of income generated through planning applications over the next couple of years, given where the economy seems to be heading. Yeah. So that's tricky for us. Okay,
and actually a lot of that sort of is coming into the next paper, isn't it? There are all sorts of projections in the next paper of loss of income, so perhaps we should sort of look at that again then. Okay, are there any other questions from the leadership team on this paper before I open it to other people? Nope, doesn't seem so. So, Marie-Therese, have you got any comments on this as the chair of the OSC?
No, sorry, I don't. I have a question on the next paper. But on this one, it all makes sense to me.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mason, any comment on this one?
I think Councillor Mason is not in the meeting. He said he might be a bit late.
Fine. And Councillor Blakeman, I know you're in the audience.
No, thanks.
No, fine. Okay, so the summary of the recommendations you'll see on the screen in front of you, but the actual proper detailed recommendations are in paragraph 2.1. So are you happy to agree the recommendations in paragraph 2.1? Anyone disagree, please speak now. Thank you. We'll take that as taken then. And let's move on then, please, to the next paper on the agenda, which is A5, which is really a very important paper, which is our revenue monitoring position, period 2. And again, Mary, would you like to introduce us?
Yes, I mean, I suppose this is the kind of budget monitoring report I would hope never to have to bring to the council or bring to the leadership team, showing as it does at this early stage in the year, as a result of COVID, such an enormous overspend. And more importantly, such a huge loss of income over the period. We all know the reasons for that, and to some extent that has been mitigated by some government grants and obviously our contingency. And I hope maybe that Taryn and Mike might have a better, or might have a better idea of the government grant situation by now and can share that with us. But fundamentally what this says to me is that we really have to keep our foot on the pedal for looking for savings, not just in-year savings, but also looking forward to the gap that we were trying to fill anyway. So our situation is compounded by this, and all of us need to go back to our business groups, me included, and have a really good look through everything that we do. I think it also worth reminding ourselves that it makes any kind of growth an extreme challenge as well. So there's anything else you want to do, really you have to think about other stuff you want to stop doing, because it will be a much starker choice in this year and the following years than before. It's also worth noting the capital programme and slippage, which still is in a state that we, is not what we want. And that there is, just to reassure colleagues, that there is still a lot of work going on to address that for the future. And I hope by the end of this financial year we'll have a much clearer grip of it all. But and I'm sure that we want to look at some of the items on the individual service groups, services, but I'll leave that to colleagues. And I just wondered if Michael Taryn had anything to add on the most recent update from government.
Yes, Mike, that would be helpful to have an update.
Yes. I'm afraid there isn't any more information at this stage. They haven't given us any more specific information. I mean, I think we mentioned a figure of 10 million in the report of additional support for the lost income, and that's still our expectation that it will be around that. It really depends on which elements of income they agree to provide the support for, and at the moment it doesn't include lost outsourced leisure income, and it doesn't include commercial income, and unless they add those to the lost income that they're going to support, the figure will probably end up around the £10 million mark, which is it's about 70% of the income they are covering. And again, on the extra expenditure, where they provided another £500 million nationally, we're expecting about 1.5 million, but we haven't been given a precise figure for that yet. But obviously, that having been said, a figure of around 11.5 million extra against the overspend, the net overspend shown in the report of 26.9 million does bring us down to 16 million. Still a very big figure, but I think it is challenging. But the strong finances identified in the last report from last year will certainly help us to deal with that. And we are also looking for, as Councillor Will said, in-year savings, which will get rid of the rest of that overspend.
Yeah. So actually, I'd like to draw your attention in paragraph 1.5, where you say, additional pressure is not included in the forecast, and the true pressure may increase or decrease. And we've really got to keep an eye on this, and it needs to keep, coming back. It'll come back in the autumn when we'll have another, a better idea, right?
Yes, it's absolutely an estimate. It's a very early estimate, really, period 2, as it says. It is still quite hard to be certain what's going to happen in the rest of this year, as everybody knows. So I think it should be taken that the figures in here are an early estimate of the overspend, and it could get worse. Hopefully it won't, but it could.
Yeah. So Mary's point holds very true.
Very much so.
Everyone's got to figure out what in-year savings they can find for this year, and then in addition to that, what savings they can find for the years hereafter, because we're entering a very tricky period. What questions are there from the leadership team? I'm looking at my meeting chat to see if anyone wants to ask a question. I think everyone is sort of silenced by, Councillor Kamali.
Yeah, it's not so much a question. I think just something that I'm sort of disheartened by was our commercial waste service, because this year was really going to be good for the team. They'd done a lot of work last year building up our contracts with a number of hospitality businesses within the borough, and obviously given they've all had to close, there's been a very large they've not been able to bring in the revenue that they were expecting, and it's obviously had an impact on the department on the whole. But I'm quite hopeful that sort of the work that they've put in will lead to good things in the next year or two, when things bounce back and we all start eating out once again. So it's a bit unfortunate. I think this whole report shows all the positives we are doing, how quickly they can be unwound by such a global event. Anyway, yeah. Thank you.
Any other comments before I open it up? Josh.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to, kind of reiterate what Councillor Kamali said as well. First of all, I think it's a really excellent report and lays out clearly what's going to happen. Just thought of flag for the benefit of the people who may be dialing in. We're working with London councils, especially regarding the government's mooted changes to under 18 travel. That will obviously have a large impact on the Family and Children's Services budget. If that does come into effect, that is the removal of under 18-year-old travel from TfL. As mentioned, we're working with London councils to ensure we get the best possible result from that. But it is a concern, especially if that does come into effect. So I think we just got to all bear that in mind going forward. But that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anyone else like to chip in? Kim.
Yes, I suppose in the spirit of Josh, I mean, just to highlight with the impact of COVID has been on our rental income. It's a massive, massive impact of, £7.6 million. We are effectively working very hard with our commercial tenants in order to support them. Some people are continuing to trade, and we're just going into a new quarter now, and we're a bit more optimistic in terms of what we're collecting. But, it's still going to be a large impact on us moving forward.
Well, hopefully by the time we look at this monitoring report in the autumn, we will be able to be a bit more optimistic about things, because this certainly doesn't make very happy reading. Anybody else? Okay, Mary-Therese, as chair of the select... Oh, sorry, Sarah Addenbrook.
Okay.
You wish to answer the question before I opened it up?
Sorry, I'm struggling with my camera again. I just really wanted to highlight in adult social care, it's very difficult now with COVID-19 for us really to, what is going to be the impact for us going forward? I mean, at the moment, we're forecasting an underspend of 166,000, but COVID-19 has had a huge impact on our services. We saw a reduction in care packages in April and May, but we've seen some of that come back. We've seen an increase in the number of learning disability transitions, and we expect to see an increase in mental health support. So I think for us, it's very difficult going forward. And then we have the added CCG risk of going 8 to 1. So I just wanted to flag that up again.
Thank you. Councillor Thalasites. Johnny.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I was going to pick up slightly on what Josh said as well around sort of working with partners and TfL, because that's another source of real uncertainty for us, particularly in our transport budgets. So to give a good example, on one cycle scheme along Queensgate, despite earlier indications that it was going to be funded by TfL, we're now hearing that it won't be. As things stand, though we hope it will change. We're being told there's no funding available, even for schemes that we had indications could be funded, and that do meet the guidance. So there are a lot of moving parts in our budget too, and I thought I'd flag that.
Thank you. Anyone else before I ask Mary Trez? Mary Trez, as chair of the Select Committee, is anything you wish to ask?
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. I'd like to have a bit of help with some numbers, actually, from either Mary or Taryn. So I'm on page 26, and it's where you say there is a shortfall in the current year of £15 million. And that is despite all the additional support from government. And then you kind of go on to say how it might be mitigated. So what I wondered is the 11.3% underspend, can that be set against the 15 million? And then in the next part, 9.10, we're told there is a reduction of 7.8 million in service budgets. So could those two figures be set against the 15 million? Am I reading that correctly?
Mike, do you want to come back? Taryn?
Yep, I can. It's Mike coming in.
Sorry,
No, that's okay. I can take that question. Sorry, I'll just put my camera on.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So just in relation to the underspend, so yes, you're right. So the 15 million is before the various initiatives that we've outlined in the second part of the report. So the 11.3 million underspend, which you saw actually at the start in the previous report, which was the outturn, absolutely that can be a one-off contribution towards the overspend. So the 15 million, so that can be offset. Now it does then leave a small shortfall, probably about 5 to 6 million or thereabouts, and the remainder of those opportunities are where we'd like to explore, certainly for the in-year savings. So I think certainly if you'd asked us probably 6 weeks ago, before we'd obviously been notified of the additional funding that was coming through, which Mike's just talked about, I think we were looking at a lot higher overspend. We were looking at the 15 million, and also we were looking at potentially 15 million of in-year savings. That additional funding that's come through obviously has potentially reduced that quite significantly. So in answer to your question, yes, we can use the 11.3 million to offset. So that is currently sitting in the budget stabilisation reserve, and that can be brought in to address some of those pressures. But what it doesn't do is quite close the gap for this year. So there is still some further pressures that we still need to find. We are, as Mary said, asking services to find some of those in-year savings, because we really don't want to be in a position of using reserves in the current year. And apologies, can I just get you to, my internet connection isn't great, and I missed your reference to the 7 million. Can I just get you to repeat that part of your question?
It's paragraph 9.10. It goes towards it's a 7.8 million reduction. That's your savings, the service budget. That's the potential saving.
Yeah. So what that refers to is actually that 7. Okay, so what that refers to is the 7.8 million savings that were agreed last year, agreed as part of the budget in March. So they've already been taken out of the budget, they've already been removed. And what we're saying is that we are assuming in some cases they're not delivered, and we built those into the pressures in the report, but we would be looking for savings over and above the 7.8. So the 7.8 have already been assumed in that 15 million figure.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. And can I just have one follow-up question? On the next page, you go on about a gap of 25 million over the next 2 years, and 17 of that is in 21-22. So that again would leave 8 million for this financial year. Is that correct? There's already correct, a gap.
Yes. So the
8 million.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, that will be for the following year, for 22-23 financial year. So it's the 25 million is 17 million in 21-22, and then a further 8 million in 22-23.
It doesn't say that. So is there a further in this year? Is there a further budget gap? I'm asking.
No, in this year the gap is the 26.9 million.
Okay.
In the report, and plus or minus anything that obviously changes during the year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Judith, I know you're in the room. Is there anything you'd like to ask?
Sorry, Councillor.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you're all switching off. Did I cut you off, Taryn? Did you wish to add anything?
No, I was just I don't know if people can hear me. I was just going to say to Councillor Rossi that we're obviously meeting through the budget working group. So we've got our first meeting on Friday. So, you know, these are some of the questions that we're going to talk through with the budget working group on Friday. Apologies, that's my fault. And apologies for the IT as well.
No, thank you, Tara. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks. Thank you. So if there are no other questions or comments from the leadership team or anyone else in the meeting who wishes to chip in, I can't see any coming up. So can we thank actually the officers again for a really, really good report. Again, as you can see, there's so few questions. It's because it's been written so well and clearly. And can we please all agree the recommendations in paragraph 2.1, which are on the website and a synopsis of which are on the screen in front of you? Are there anyone who doesn't agree with this? Can they put something in the chat? Otherwise, I'll be quiet for a second. And if I don't hear anything and you don't chime in, I'll assume that they're taken as read. Okay, so can we please adopt those recommendations? Right, so now we go on to our culture plan, which looks very exciting. In paper, sorry, I've actually got paper this time. Paper A6, and I'd just like to say that we have had a report from the Environment Select Committee, which has looked at this on the 6th of July, and their overall impression was very favourable, but there were a couple of questions that they wished to raise, and I know that Councillor Will has got a copy of them, so I'd just like to ask her after her introduction or during the discussion whether that she could address the points that they do raise. Again, I thought it was a fantastic plan, and can I just say I love the flowery octopus on, I can't think what page it's on, page 22. I think the whole thing looks so vibrant and alive, so many congratulations for a great report. And over to you, Councillor Will, not Wheel. Emma.
Thank you, Leader. And those of you who haven't seen the hard copy, here it is. I won't put the flowery octopus page up, but I think that's great too. Let me just deal with the environment paper from the Environment Committee before I talk more generally. Actually, it was really, I think, if I understood correctly, some suggestions, recommendations for both this one-year plan and the longer piece we will do afterwards, all of which seem very sensible and I'm very happy to take on board. But I know Councillor Rossi's here and she may want to ask some more questions. But if I just turn to this, what I think I would call a labour of love. Originally, way back, this was going to be a 5-year plan. And then, unfortunately, of course, we've had the terrible trauma of COVID. And we did consider scrapping it altogether. But then we've really two things. First, we were very conscious that a huge amount of work and engagement had gone into it, about 5,000 separate conversations with everyone in the sector. So that was the first thought. And the second thing is, I think what we realise now more than ever is we need to not step down, but step up to support all the wonderful and amazing culture in this borough. It's important for people's well-being. It's important for people's livelihoods. So that, in fact, we need to show our support more than ever. And so what we've done is create a 1-year plan, which we know will need to be flexible because of COVID. But within that, we've put about 55 recommendations, things we think we can deliver in this next year, many of them digital, and Carnival is a very obvious one, and we're still putting 175,000 into creating a fantastic digital Carnival. But you've also got things like the Chelsea History Festival, you've got the Kensington Chelsea Arts Week, there's lots more good stuff in there. I hope you'll have a look at it all. And so that will be for this year. And then next year we will move, hopefully, to create a 4-year plan with perhaps more conventional activities, if you like. But all of those, I hope, will be really important in supporting the sector and bringing people back into the borough and creating some fun and interesting activities for our residents. So I shall stop there. I know Terry Oliver and Verona Cornwall, who've done so much work on this, and can I thank officers for all their work and patience on this, are here to answer questions as well. I don't know if they want to say something first before we do that.
Let me see if there are any questions or comments from the leadership team first. Josh and then Anne.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Rendell here for our viewers. Yes, Emma, I think a really, really good report. And likewise, Elizabeth said, I think the actual physical copy of the report itself is amazing. It's good that we've got such flexibility, especially with the digital offering this year. That's really, really great. One of the questions I had, though, was in the report itself covered. So section 5.1, it says here, additional £100,000 has been allocated towards assisting and cultural partners in this. Just wondering, where that money's come from, how's it impacted your overall budget? Is that going to be, carried over to the next year, or kind of things along those lines? I mean, how have we how's that, utilising best spend of public money in regards to that?
Okay. Let me start on that, and I might hand over to officers, but essentially that is money that we have specifically set aside to deliver this plan in the next year. I think it's incredibly important that we support this sector. I mean, if we don't, these institutions, which deliver so much for our residents, will disappear. So I think it's money very well spent. I mean, Carnival's a very good example of that. It's something that is, so important to bring people together, and it generates, a lot of things out of it. So the money was always budgeted. It is there. And I hope in many ways it will generate more income for the sector, which is critical at this time. But I don't know if Terry Oliver or Verona Cornwall would like to say anything on that.
Terry? Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so it's always been allocated. So it's actually come from the Special Projects Reserve that we bid for. And the intention really is to kind of lever in additional partnership support as well through this funding. So it is actually, it's not a huge amount of money. So we do want to try and work with our partners in achieving some additional external funding through this as well. And we kind of need that seed funding in order to do that.
Thank you. Now, I know lots of people have put their hands up, but on my screen I can just see one hand. But I believe that Councillor Syra and Councillor Folkes wish to ask a question. Is there anyone else as well? And if you do you want to put a Q in the meeting chat? So, Edinburgh, Sarah, right. Let's start with you. Sarah, why don't you chip in?
So, Emma, could you tell us a little bit more about the development of digital skills, especially in schools? I'm going to hand over to officers to answer that one. I think you'll get a clearer answer.
Thank you, Councillor. So, as we said before, this culture plan is really kind of focused on the online offer. We've got to be flexible with that. So we are working with we're working with the Youth Council on an arts grant. So they've got £5,000 that they're working on specific projects or cultural projects they would like to do. I suppose with the schools, it's something we've got to explore more because of the current setup with COVID has really impacted schools. So if there are any additional suggestions how we can do that, then be very, very happy to hear and take those comments on board, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Folkes.
Hello. Yes, I just wanted to commend the culture plan. I think it's fantastic to see that so many actions in here. And just to really back up what Councillor Will was saying was how incredibly important this is for the whole economy of the borough, which, as you've mentioned, if we want to get visitors back, or even actually if we want our residents to come out onto the streets, we need to absolutely emphasise what a vibrant and exciting borough this is to live in. So I really welcome all this, and particularly from business perspective, I like some of the ideas that you're developing about using empty shops and just generally brightening up the whole area by making it more alive with artistic activities and hopefully some more flowery octopuses and things like that, which will make people feel happy and get them out into the street and hopefully use our businesses in the borough. So thank you for this. And I look forward to the next 4 years after this, when you'll be able to develop some more physical things that we can hopefully all attend. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Siren.
Thank you, Chair. So I also wanted to really welcome this culture plan, and I think it's really important for all our communities to re-engage with culture, and us to give them as many opportunities to do that as possible. And I really like that it's action orientated. But I had a question about measurement, which is touched on in the plan. But I wondered whether we could just talk a little bit more about that, because I think it's important that we know what impact we're having and whatever learnings we can get from the impact that we've had, given that we're sort of operating within this new normal.
Yeah, so as you, thank you, Anne, for that. And I think it's a good question. And so, as you rightly say, section 6, there is on measuring impact. And I think it is important we do that, A, to see that we spent money well, but B, so that we can learn for the bigger plan, where we're having impacts and where we're perhaps not having the impact we want. And so there is some detail there about how we're going to measure, monitor the outputs and outcomes. And I don't have all that detail yet, because this, as I said at the start, it's still work in progress. Again, I don't know if officers want to comment a little bit more about that, but it's certainly very key that we do that, and I think it will inform the wider plan that comes later.
Terry, do you want to comment, or I think others pretty much summed up.
Can do, yeah. So again, how we measure success is really important. So we do have a comms and engagement plan. There's some smart targets around that. Again, with the individual projects themselves, there will be smart targets and KPIs linked to that. So we have got that section 6 where we are kind of measuring the amount of people engaged in the individual projects. So that's something we do need to enhance, and definitely for the 4-year plan moving forward, we do need a very, very clear list of like KPIs and what success looks like.
Thank you. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, Emma, have you replied to the select committee on their recommendations or other things that we can adopt?
I don't think I've formally replied, but all the things that I saw them suggesting all seem very sensible. So I'm very happy to. I think there were 3 for the short term, for the 1-year plan, and 3 suggestions for the longer plan. And very happy to to agree to those. I think there were probably things we'd have done anyway, but definitely up for those.
Thank you. So, Marie-Therese, if you can feed this back to your select committee, that we are very happy to have had all their recommendations. Is there anything you wish to comment on, or you wish to?
There is. If I could say, I think it's beautifully put together, this, and very comprehensive, and it reminds us of what a kind of rich and varied borough we live in. I have one question then. It's something we touched on in the meeting with the police. So, in view of the recent street parties and raves, how prepared are we in case we had a spontaneous type carnival, which I think is something that might happen? So I just wanted to know if we're preparing for that.
So preparations for Carnival, Emma.
And the answer to that, and again, is most definitely yes. Obviously, we know there's been a lot of UMEs going on, in particular in the Portobello area. We're talking to police, we're talking to Westminster, we're talking to the comms team. We need to think very carefully about having a fantastic digital carnival, but encouraging people not to come on that weekend because there will not be a physical carnival. So we're well aware of it. It's I'm not going to pretend it's a simple thing. But it's most definitely on the radar. There is planning going on. I don't know if Terry, you want to say anything else about that?
Yeah, can add. So there is lots of planning going on in the background, as there most probably is quite a high likelihood that there will be gatherings over that weekend. So we've got 3 kind of plans we're developing. We've got the ops plan, which is kind of how the council will deal with unlicensed activity over that weekend, and we have a team of approximately 25 officers booked in to work that weekend to deal with that. We've got our comms and engagement plan, which has just been firmed up now, and we've really started. There's actually the launch tomorrow of the online carnival, so we've got some really good messaging going out there to say, look, Carnival is fantastic, but please stay home, stay safe, and enjoy Carnival from home. And there's going to be a series of messages going out on a very regular basis from now on, promoting that message. And then we've got a kind of a preparation plan, which is looking at kind of extra resources, which is needed, which will be needed over that weekend, such as a kind of a clean-up plan, dealing with parks if there are lots more activities in parks. So we've got a lot of planning going on, and we're working very closely with our strategic partners in Westminster and with the police as well to make sure that the policing plan that they've got is adequate as well for that weekend.
And can I say? But I think the only thing we're all thinking of all the downsides that the organisers have done an amazing event, and this is going to be the best global digital festival that anyone's seen. So it's of course we're preparing for things, but we have absolute confidence in the organisers that they're going to just produce something amazing online. And Emma, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that, you can order things through the post and all sorts of things.
Absolutely. Let me say one thing. Firstly, just to reply again to Councillor Rossi's question, I think it's the police on that meeting, that scrutiny meeting, did reassure us that they would still have a very large number of officers available, and they were still assuming that was the case. Obviously, we hope it won't be. So, they will still be available. But yes, I mean, I've just seen sort of some details today of what's going on. There's masses of stuff. Sorry, that's not very detailed, is it? But it does look really exciting. And it actually shows you what we can do and how innovative you can be, even when you can't physically meet in person. So all credit to CVT for really, really getting behind this. I think they're calling it Access All Areas, is what they're calling it, Carnival Access All Areas. So I think we're all looking forward to that.
I think we are. Are there any other questions? Judith, I know you're in the room, as it were. Is there anything you would like to comment?
Yes, I would, because I don't know how many members of the public are watching this, but you twice referred to comments that came through scrutiny, but you haven't actually said what those comments were. And I think if the public are watching this, I think they need to know what those comments were. I don't know what they were either.
If I can get it up, I'll read them out to you, Judith. I'll just, sorry, I can try and, Mary.
I've got them if you want me to read them out.
I'm just trying to open the document. Why don't, if you've got it open,
yes,
please do go ahead.
Okay, the Select Committee makes well, first of all, it says it's very positive, commends many of the measures, the pace at which it's been developed, and particularly welcomes the use of digital engagement. So very positive. The recommendation to the one-year culture plan was that the council takes a flexible approach to implementing it, adapting it to take account of emerging opportunities as and when COVID-19 recedes, for example, in schools regarding pupil well-being and the development of digital skills. That the council considers hosting a cultural event in the Civic Art Gallery in the spring of 2021 to promote the cultural arts offerings in response to COVID-19. And that there's an update on the implementation of this plan be provided to the next meeting of the Environment Select Committee. And I think all those things Emma has said that would be absolutely fine. The recommendations to the long-term culture plan was that the committee's provided with a briefing on the development of the long-term culture plan. And so they can make suggestions at an early stage. It seems very reasonable. That the council has a clear theme and branding and coordination for the leadership amongst culture. And I know that Emma has been working incredibly hard with our comms team to develop that, and in conjunction with all the museums and other arts people in the whole borough, that we all get together and we have put money in so we get a bigger bang for our buck. We're working incredibly closely with all the other cultural institutions. And that leads to the next recommendation, which we agree with, that we have a stronger social media presence for culture, learning from the effective social media engagement by other cultural institutions in London. And yes, we hope to do that. And yes, in conjunction with our other institutions. Emma, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think I just wanted to stress that first point about how this is work in progress. And Sarah, you asked a very good question about the digital engagement with schools, which is alluded to in that. There isn't a specific recommendation around it. It cuts across a lot of the work. But this very morning, I was having a conversation with the Science Museum about how they really want to get out and do more outreach, particularly in schools in North Kensington. And that's exactly the kind of, when I say it's work in progress, that's not fixed yet, it's not set in stone, but everyone's thinking, how can we work differently? How can we do better engagement, particularly when the schools reopen it in September? So I hope, there's lots of good stuff in here, but we just cannot encapsulate all the work that we'd like to happen and needs to happen. And so please, it will morph and change. But there's, it's a beginning, not an end, I think. I'd just like to stress.
And I think that's very well, neatly summed up by the slide you have in front of you, where we're asked to recommend the one-year culture plan to commit to work collaboratively with our partners and communities, to deliver the priorities set out and participate in evidence and data gathering required to shape the next culture plan period. So on that basis, that's a synopsis of what we have in paragraph 2.1. Can we accept those recommendations as a leadership team? Thank you. Right, so moving on, can we now move on to the next few papers, all of which are going to be fronted by Kim Taylor-Smith, and which are also very succinct and well written. So thank you. Kim, do you want to introduce A7, please? And I'd just like to say that the Select Committee for Housing has not actually met yet, so we have no report from them to consider. However, individuals on the committee have sent in comments on an individual basis to Kim, which I believe he's responded to and which you might like to pick up briefly tonight, Kim.
Yes.
Anyway, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'll start with an apology in as much that, yes, there are 5 papers coming here. And I'll start with the first one because, a number of them have the same theme, and that is, to remind the committee that, this is all part of our 600 new homes programme, utilising a grant from the GLA of 33.6 million, and with a commitment to mixed tenure housing with a minimum of 50% of those new homes being at a social rent. And although 50% is the minimum, we have made very clear policy commitment as part of this programme to achieve the highest possible number of affordable housing split, and to expand our policy of really wanting to create mixed tenure housing schemes across the borough. I think it's important that we don't want to see more rich people or low income housing ghettos, as there's obviously very clear positive evidence that mixing both private, intermediate and social homes has a very, very clear benefit. But this particular paper is that in order to do so and to speed up the delivery of these homes, we have to do a report for planning purposes. And it's recommended that the sites within this overall programme are linked, so that the 50-50 tenure split in order to achieve planning can be met from the programme as a whole, and not just on individual site-by-site basis. And I'm delighted to say that the stage 1 sites are going to planning committee next week on the 21st of July. And this represents obviously a very important milestone for us in this programme. These four sites are 97 homes going forward. And by adopting this approach, we'll be able to deliver 74% new affordable homes rather than 50% as set out in our community housing SPD, which we adopted last month, if we did this on a site-by-site basis. So it's a very important thing that we need to get in place before this programme starts. Dan and Doug are in here, and I'm happy, if you wish, Elizabeth, to take questions now and then answer raise the points that the OSC made afterwards, or if you'd like me to just continue on and talk about the OSC comments, I'm very happy to do so.
Why don't we see what comments, if there are any comments? I mean, I don't have any. I think it's terrific, and it's just very sensible. Jem Kamali.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Kim, and thank the council. Really, I think it's really exciting that we've got, we've talked about it a lot, the new homes delivery, and it's really great to see that we're getting there now. Obviously, it sort of falls to me to make sure that we're doing things in the greenest possible fashion. And I know, Kim, we've discussed this, but it's probably worth sort of talking about it in public. That obviously, I am pushing you for the buildings to be as green as possible. But I get the sense sort of structurally that there is a cost element to that. And I think it's worth us sort of really appreciating that we're not operating in a vacuum. Different departments have different targets, and really just to make sure that, it is incorporated in your building plan that these buildings do go as green as possible, because it's good not just for us and for the environment, but also for the residents. They have lower energy bills, etc. So just wanted to get that on the record, really, and get your opinion on it. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I think our commitment to carbon neutral 2030 is very much in focus as far as both our new homes are concerned, and also our refurbishment programme. For obvious reasons, doing this with new homes is going to be a lot easier. And we'll obviously build that into the specification in order to get to a zero carbon position on our new build. You're absolutely right. It does cost a lot of money, and it is going to involve us in a certain degree of pragmatism. I mean, we're reviewing now what we can do and what the incremental cost is. And clearly that cost comes as part of a viable programme. And so I really don't want to see a reduction in the number of homes that we build in order to meet our target. I think as an early indication suggests that we can get to a sort of 80% green level at a reasonable cost, but that additional 20% to get carbon neutral is quite an exponential increase. And so we will obviously have to start looking at pragmatic solutions, such as looking at buying carbon credits in order to fill the gap. But this is something, as I say, we're looking at it, something which we've had input from Extinction Rebellion in, which I'm very grateful for, but that commitment there is there. When it comes to our refurbishment of our housing stock, we're bearing in mind that almost 50% of our housing stock was built
Look, I really appreciate the conversation about the refurbishment of the housing stock, but we're actually talking tonight about this new homes programme. So I think you've
I'm getting too passionate about greening.
Yeah, but I think it's a good thing that we're thinking about greening everything, and I think Jem's point is well made, but I think you've answered it. So are there any other questions about this particular paper from the leadership team? I think it's pretty straightforward. No. Okay. I'll come back about the individuals who've asked you questions from the Select Committee in a minute, Kim. But let me ask, Mary-Therese, have you got any questions on this?
No, I don't.
No?
I just think we should get building as soon as we can. That's
exactly. Judith, as you're here, any questions from you?
No comments.
Okay. Kim, do you want to just, individuals who had comments to make, do you want to just refer to them briefly?
Yes. Again, the committee didn't comment on a whole, and obviously because they're not meeting until next week, we had 3 individual comments that came. Councillor Hammond and Councillor Smetterling both commented to say that they were very supportive with the approach. We had a more substantive response from Councillor Kasim Ali, who's the chairman of the Select Committee, which I will be responding to in greater detail. But in broad terms, he was seeking to increase the percentage of socially rented homes up to 100% and consider whether or not we should split the 50% of non-socially rented homes down to affordable and 25%. So again, I think I need to stress that 50% is a minimum, and we will push the numbers of socially rented homes as high as we viably can. And viability in simple terms means that this programme cannot put a long-term strain on the general fund or the HRA, as we obviously have got to cover the cost of borrowing from the rents that we're receiving. And this has become more critical as we looked at the other papers with regard to the impact on the HRA account from rental at the moment. So on the increasing of the number of affordable homes, which is highlighted, this is very much, again, at the heart of our commitment to create these mixed tenure estates and the highest percentage of affordable and socially rented homes that we can make financially viable. And if we will achieve 23%, which is 2% short of Kasim Ali's 25%, on affordable and key worker homes from the stage 1 sites that are going into planning next week. And I'll also be announcing shortly a pilot key worker scheme with the intention of creating a more comprehensive scheme at the end of the year. So there's going to be very much a judgment that we need to make between splitting between social rent and intermediate key worker. You know, obviously social rent helps those that are most in need and clearly our number 1 priority, but it does require more subsidy and less affordable housing doesn't.
So it's not possible in this case.
We will do our best to get the maximum number, but 100% will not be possible in terms of the confines.
Well, you could answer more questions when you go to the Select Committee next week. But on the basis of this paper, I think we've invited questions, we've answered them, and we should look now at the recommendations. And I would say, actually, we have Anna Benbow here, and thank you very much for coming, Anna, for this paper. But again, it's so well written, everything's so clearly laid out. I don't think anyone's really got any particular questions. So thank you, A, for the paper, and B, for coming. And unless anyone's got anything else, can we please agree the recommendations in paragraph 2.1, which is on your screen in front of you? Okay, so the recommendations are carried. Can we now look at the next paper, which is paper A8, which is Kim with Dan Hawthorne, who's our new exec, probably not that new anymore, pre-COVID Executive Director for Housing and Social Investment. Kim?
Yeah, again, I'll be brief. We're seeking permission to buy 11 leasehold properties from Notting Hill Genesis, which will then be refurbished. And in line with our adopted local lettings plan, 3 of these households are households who are living in these properties on the estate at the time of the Grenfell Tower will be offered social tenancies, which will be held in the HRA. And the remaining 8 will remain in for use as temporary accommodation and held in the Grenfell Trust. The properties will be managed by the Lanc West neighbourhood team, and the purchasing of these properties really gives us greater control over the refurbishment process. And it also ensures that the TA tenants placed by the council do see improvements on their house. And this, again, supported by the council buyback scheme, council house buyback scheme, and this has been endorsed by the Lancaster West RA.
Oh, good. Okay. I was going to say, and the good thing is as well, there are 4 2-bedroom, 6 3-bedroom homes and 1 4-bedroom home, and that's exactly what we need, isn't it? It's for larger families that we're looking for.
Larger family homes are a priority.
Yeah. Okay. Dan, I don't know if there's anything you want to comment on before we've got a question from Sarah.
No, nothing to add. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Sarah?
So my question is, will Notting Hill Genesis reinvest the 4 million back into the borough?
Well, can I say that I have written to Kate Davis, the chief executive, asking to spend the money on the properties that we have in the borough and demonstrate their commitment towards the residents. I've just written to them. I've yet to have a reply, but I'll report back when I have one.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on this?
Yes.
Who's that?
Judith.
Oh, that's Judith. I'll go first to, actually, I should say, Marie-Therese first, and then I'll come to you, Judith.
No, I don't really have any comments on this.
Okay. Judith.
Yes, thank you. It's correct that the Residents Association approved this. I approve it too. There was extensive consultation, unusually, which is great. But at the end of the day, we were forced to accept that only 3 of them would be social housing. Ideally, both the Residents Association and the ward councillors wanted them all to go back into the social housing pot.
Judith, you know, I'm not sure about the word forced. I mean, as it sets out in the paper, the issue with the 8 households who are in effectively TA accommodation, who obviously have been put there after the Grenfell fire, is that in order to put those as social housing, they would have to be vacant. They would have to leave their homes. And then we would have to offer those homes on the letting system. And offer them to people in terms of priority. And it was very much felt that that would be unfair to them as individuals. And that at least by remaining in their homes, we can give them a greater sense of security in the fact that we are the landlord rather than the Notting Hill Genesis. And they will obviously benefit from the refurbishment, including internal refurbishments of their homes.
Thank you. Okay, if there aren't any other questions or comments, can we please agree the recommendations in paragraph 2? And as I said again, the synopsis is on the screen, but the actual recommendations are on the website and in your reports. Are we all happy to accept those recommendations? Thank you. Agreed then. And can we please turn to paper A9? And I'd just like to say that papers A9, A10 and A11 had confidential or exempt appendices. The leadership team have seen them, questions have been asked and have been answered, so we have no need to go into part B this evening. We can stay in part A because or any questions that have been raised have been answered. And now over to you, Kim, Lancaster West Estate refurbishment.
Again, this is an important step in the overall Lancaster West refurbishment process of 57.9 million, and we're seeking approval today for 6 contracts. And that if appointed, we will appoint a design consultancy, to give expertise and advice to the council, the Lanc-West neighbourhood team, and most importantly also the residents, and advice on the delivery of the proposed works across the estate. So it also, the paper outlines the engagement that we've had with the residents in order to come to these conclusions, and some of the pre-work disciplines such as architects. It was an open competition process that was agreed with our residents, and they really wanted us to ensure that we maximise the level of competition and engagement at each stage of the improvement. So, and the residents have informed that process, and we had over 60 contractors expressing interest and had 12 bids. So I'm quite pleased with that outcome. And if we approve this and it will be signed in August, we can then push on with the co-designing of the scheme. And as I say, we need to get on with this quickly. Thank you. James Caspel, I think you're here this evening. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank the residents who I know are watching tonight, who've helped to score and moderate the 12 bids we received. We ended up with 17 residents score and moderate the 12 bids, which I think is a real credit to the estate and the borough as a whole. And I think collectively we're recommending 4 design teams who we feel are going to be in a place to help us design that 21st century model estate, but also, following on from the conversation earlier, help us to meet the council's commitment to be net zero by 2030.
Fantastic. Well, I think we would say as a committee, thank the residents who have spent so much time helping with this. And as you say, it would be a great thing if we can have an estate which is the 21st century. Are there any comments or any questions from any lead members on this? I think it's very exciting, and personally, I think we need to get on with it. But are there anything anyone wants to add? Nope, nothing from lead members. Can I ask Marie-Therese if there's anything from you as chair of the OSC?
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
And Judith, you're in the meeting, so is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, just to tell you that we will take him apart at the next board meeting and further on the matters arising, which he knows full well about.
Fine. Yes. Okay. On the basis of the recommendations in front of you and in paragraph 2.1, are we all happy to agree this? Yes. Great. Thank you very much. Could we please turn to paper A10?
A10.
Again.
Yes, I'm sorry. This is back to our housing program again. Good. And this is seeking, approval to appoint Perfect Circle as project manager to provide a sort of multidiscipline design and consultancy service for the stage 2. As I've said, stage 1 is in now for planning. As stage 2 is a further 272 homes over 3 sites. And Perfect Circle's a collaboration between a few different organisations, and it gives us a more streamlined approach, so we don't have to commission each of the disciplines individually. Again, it's worth highlighting that we'll be working with Perfect Circle to incorporate social, environmental and economic outcomes, as well as not just building homes. Again, I'd just say, finish it. There was a comment that came from Councillor Schmetterling of the OHC, who made a comment on this paper, A10, and I have responded to him, and he's happy with the replies to his question.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the leadership team? I know we have Anna Bembo here to help answer any questions. Seems pretty straightforward. No? Councillor Rossi, anything?
No comment from me.
Any other comments? No? Okay. Could we please agree the recommendations in paragraph 2? Okay, agreed. And can I just say, I think this evening is, it's I shouldn't say it's rare, but it's good that we have had so many things about getting the new homes beginning to get delivered, refurbishing the Lanc West estate, appointing a design and consultant team. Really feels like we're beginning to move on these things, and about time. But nevertheless, that's really great and very exciting. So finally, final paper. Kim, grant of a long lease at 5 to 6 Acklam Road.
Yes, this is the last one. So we're seeking approval to heads of term with the Almanar for a building which is literally across the other side from the mosque. And this is a project to build 32 homes and a community centre. And we've been talking to the Almanar about the potential of leasing them out the rest of the ground floor on this development since it really was first came to inception. and we've incorporated this idea and collaboration into our consultation and activities, which, apart from a couple of dissenting votes, as universally, people have been supported, reflecting, the high regard that they and we have with the Almanar and everything that they do for our community. So it's something we're very keen to do. There are certain restrictions in terms of the rates that we can charge, so we don't fall foul of sort of state aid laws. But the dialogue is going on. I will mention, in the event that Almanar wouldn't want to proceed, then what we would do is we would use the space. The space will be designated as commercial space onto the ground floor, and then we would obviously have to reconsider what sort of social investment value we would put on that and what we might use it for.
Okay. Anyone want to come in on this one? We have looked at the heads of terms in Part B, I should add. No? Great. Okay. Then please can we accept the recommendations in paragraph 2, which is to approve the heads of terms set out in the exempt Part B appendix, which councillors and lead members have seen and are happy with, and to delegate the approval of any appropriate amendments to the heads of terms to the Executive Director and the Investment of Housing and Social Investment, following consultation with the Deputy Leader at Grenfell Housing and Social Investment. So we were happy to accept those recommendations. Yes, agreed. Okay.
Excellent. I'll go and lie down now.
Well, you've had half the agenda to housing, so I think that's been absolutely great. Okay, this concludes the business on the agenda. I haven't had any notice of any other business. Is there any other business that anyone wants to bring up? No? Then it just posed me to wish you well and have a good evening. And thank you all for tuning in remotely, and for the leadership team and all officers present for the reports which have come to this meeting, all of which I think have been of an exceptionally high standard. And thank you very much for them. And I hope you all have a good summer, because summer is now between us and the next meeting. So I look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. In the meantime, have a good evening and have a good summer. Thank you.